Internal leverage is this idea that success must take place inside of us before we can create the results of it externally.
Abraham is a mindset coach who works with socially conscious entrepreneurs to grow their business and increase their impact. At the start of 2017, Abraham was an overworked and underpaid filmmaker, sleeping on the floor of a yogic monastery. Resolved to change, Abraham quit his job, moved out, and began his coaching practice. In less than a year, he built a six-figure business guided by determination and a willingness to face his own truth. In this episode, we talk about how Abraham's soul felt lonely when he wasn't fulfilling his purpose and how he found his flow state. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have made big transformations, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to live our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make and deepen our understanding of ourselves, each other, and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. In this episode, we talk about money mindset, breaking stories in our subconscious, internal leverage, using motion to change your emotion, breathwork as a hack, maximizing your ability to serve, choicefulness, and why growth is proportional to the truth you can take about yourself. Now, let's go to our conversation. Abraham, welcome to Going Conscious.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm very excited to hear more about your journey. And from what I've read, you have done many things in your past. I've seen starving artist, hip hop yogi, breakdancer, monk, filmmaker, so many different things. And now what you do is help entrepreneurs to really be their best as a mindset coach. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey? What big changes did you go through and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nikki. Thank you. You know, it's so funny actually conducting this podcast episode at this time because I just, for the first time in a year, revisited my spiritual community, you know, my yoga meditation community that I've been involved with for the last 22 years. But because of COVID and just because I'm in a different place in my life right now and I'm focused on different things, I haven't been as involved or as in touch with that part of myself. I mean, I still practice my meditation and I still do all my practices that I've picked up over the years. But coming back and being in this environment and just sort of seeing the juxtaposition of where I've been and who I've become and looking at, you know, face to face with people who are basically like the 20 years ago version of myself has been such an incredible journey. So this is something that's very much on my mind. I guess in short, what I can say is, you know, originally from New York City, born and raised, grew up on hip hop. You know, that was like my first love. I learned to express myself and my pains and my anguish and my angers and fear and just everything through the medium of hip hop. So I was a break dancer. I opened up for Busta Rhymes with my crew and Dave Chappelle. I did music. But I was always yearning for something greater. Like I saw this movie Powder in the 90s about a young guy who uses supposedly 100% of his brain. And when he's able to do that, when he maximizes his potential, he turns into pure energy. And there was this part of me that spoke to, and I just said to myself, yeah, I want to really fulfill my potential. And so when I was 19, I learned yoga and meditation, and I got involved with my community, which is an international community. And I went deep into the ancient, you know, teachings of yoga, and we're talking like this is at a time when there was no Lululemon, right? Yoga was not like a popular thing back then, especially being like just some kid from New York. And you know, what can I say? I went really deep in that direction and lived with monks. I did a very intense training. I went to India. I traveled the world. I worked at a children's school in Nicaragua teaching meditation. And that was very much my experience up until about, I would say, well, I think it really began about 10 years ago when I started to realize that the purpose of my life is to inspire and to empower people. And I was going deep in meditation in my yoga practice, but I wasn't having the impact that I really wanted to have. And so I realized that there was a few things that needed to change, and that there was some things I needed to work on in terms of my ability to be in the world and to actually show up and have and provide value in a marketplace. I was never, I studied film also, and so there was a whole component where I was trying to fulfill my mission of inspiring, empowering people through the medium of film. And I did a lot of cool stuff. I directed a film that went on to win an Emmy, which is amazing. But I continued to sleep on the floor, and the phone, it wasn't ringing, I just say, right? And so I was inspiring the people around me, but it's like my soul was lonely. My soul felt like I wasn't really fulfilling my purpose, and there was so much more, so much bigger of a game that I was meant to play. And so at that point, I started to work on myself. I studied coaching, various coaching modalities. Aside from money and business, my love life really suffered. My health had some issues, and so I started looking at how can I show up in the world, and how can I show up differently, and start to fulfill those shoes, that potential that my soul yearned for. And that's what led me to business, to becoming an entrepreneur. And Nikki, you and I were talking about this on Clubhouse the other day. I had to really do a lot of work around my relationship with money, because coming from that spiritual place, money was not spiritual, money was not holy, and it was going to lead to bad things. And so even if that wasn't a conscious story, it was an unconscious story that would prevent me from taking advantage of opportunities to increase my wealth or my access to resources, right? And then there's some other stuff I can get into, but just to keep the story a little bit short, I launched my business in 2017, and for the first time, I was able to bring in six figures in income, which was a huge benchmark for me. And from there, I've just been growing and studying more and more about mindset and about stories and beliefs, and how it is that we can rearrange our relationship with money to be in approval of our desire for expansion, so that we may be in more service. So that's sort of in brief my journey from being this yogic monk, hip hop guy sleeping on the floor, to being a six-figure entrepreneur and doing this work with other six-figure and seven-figure entrepreneurs.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. What a journey. And I love that you brought up money mindset. And as we talked about, as you referred to the other day, it's something which affects everybody to some degree, and affected me too in my journey, where I also left behind, for me, it was a really successful career in the fashion industry where I had made lots of money, but didn't feel at all aligned with my values. So I left that behind, going for purpose. And it took me a while to understand that actually profit and purpose can really thrive hand in hand. That's where the magic is, because that's where you can make the biggest impact. And I know that money mindset is also something you work on with your clients. So I'm wondering, what are the biggest challenges you notice your clients go through around this topic?
That's a great question. I think the biggest challenge is awareness. And it's like the you don't know what you don't know kind of thing, right? And what I mean by that, and before I even dive into that, I'll just preface this by saying my favorite quote probably belongs to the psychologist Carl Jung, who said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct your life, and you'll call it fate." And so you have people, just like in the case with health and relationship, you have a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, who are at a what we call a set point in their financial reality, meaning that they might have some good months, or some bad months, or maybe a good year or a bad year, but they tend to hover around the same income for almost forever. For most people, I would even say for most people on the planet, once you're born into a certain class and you're raised with certain values, you will stay in that class. The odds, the chances, it's very difficult to break out of that. And the reason being, it's not because there's not the opportunities to do so. I can't tell you how many people that grew up in the same conditions as me, and the same opportunities, everything is accessible to these people as it is to me. And some people are much further along in their financial journey, and some people are much further behind. And really what it's all about, it's about these stories, these beliefs that are going on deep in our unconscious mind. The psychologists say that 85% of our mind is unconscious. It's coming from a place that doesn't correlate with our ability to reason, our logic. If you look at it from a neuroscience perspective, our prefrontal cortex, which is only a small, relatively small part of our brain, which is the sort of executive functioning of the brain, that really syncs up very well with what the psychologists call the conscious mind. Again, our ability to use willpower to reason, to say, okay, this is what I'm going after. I'm going to set the goal, and this is what I'm trying to achieve. However, what we don't understand is that we're up against that 85 or 88% of the unconscious mind. So it's the stories that are going in the opposite direction. So that story might be, money is the root of all evil, right? Money is bad. Rich people are wrong or greedy. I don't want to be like that. Whatever it is. And most people don't realize that these stories exist. And so what happens is we struggle, we work harder, we hustle harder because we think, well, if I'm making this much and I'm putting out this much energy and I want to make more, I got to put out even more energy and continue to do the same things that I'm doing. But then we come up against that wall and it's like clawing against a cement wall. We burn out. And so the two sort of areas that I work on with my clients is to help empower them to realize the stories that have been controlling and dominating their psychology for so long, to give them the internal resources to be successful and to level up. But then also on the other end of the spectrum, to help them to not go into this sort of hustle harder mentality where they absolutely burn out, and to really find what I call that internal leverage, which is where we're able to accomplish a lot more by doing less. So I'm not sure if that answered your question specifically, or if you want to dive in a little bit deeper with anything that I brought up there.
Thank you so much. No, it absolutely did. I love the answer around awareness. I think that's so, so true. We have so many stories, don't we, in our subconscious, which we just don't even see. So we have no way of understanding how they're controlling us. And I think another one as well is around feeling that if more money comes, then there will be so many other implications on our life, like we won't be able to see our family, or we won't be able to travel as much, or so many things which we just fabricate, really, and then start to act according to and self-sabotage to try to keep ourselves away from those results, which actually would never happen.
Right. Yeah.
And I love how you brought in internal leverage. It's something I wanted to ask you about, Abraham. Can you tell us, your podcast is called the Internal Leverage Podcast. So can you tell us about what internal leverage means to you?
Yeah. So internal leverage is this idea that, success must take place inside of us before we can create the results of it externally. And I'm going to get a little bit sort of philosophical, and we're going to try and make it more concrete. If you look at, for instance, the metaphor of an iceberg, the part that people see is the part that's above the surface. It's the tip of the iceberg. What they don't see is what's going on to create that tip, right? What's going into creating the results in the business. So naturally, most people, for instance, I'll give an example. You get on Clubhouse or you get on Facebook, and the rooms that are popular and the live streams and the people that are popular are the people that are giving strategies. What is it that a person is supposed to do? Which is great. We have to take action. I'm definitely not a proponent of sitting on a couch and thinking that money is going to come, because if you do that, the only thing that's going to come is an eviction notice. We have to take action. We have to get off our butt and sell the couch in order for the money to come. However, what's absolutely important, and again, this comes back to this unconscious, conscious mind, is that the way that you take action matters. What's going into the actions that you're taking, the decisions that you're making. And if you look if you peel back the layers and you go deeper in that iceberg metaphor, you go deeper down, what you find is the layer of perspective. How is it that you are seeing yourself and the problems that are arising? What is the story, which is the deepest layer, that you are telling yourself about what it is that you are seeing? Because two people are going to look at one phenomena and have totally different experience based upon their predisposed stories, right? So again, instead of working harder and going into that place of burnout, I'm really interested in how is it that we can think differently? What is it that we need to change in the way we think, in the way we set up our habits and routines, in how it is that we're showing up in terms of our physiological state? So these are all internal things, right? So we have the level of psychology, we have the level of physiology, and then there's also the level of productivity. How am I setting up my workflow? Am I being productive? Am I being effective? Am I focusing on the wrong things? Or, if you read Greg McEwen's book, Essentialism, most people, they focus on the stuff that's not very vital, right? They focus on the stuff that's not necessary, the 80%, if you will. And so there's a lot that goes into creating success, externally, creating that result externally that a lot of people don't see. And that's really where that's the place where I like to play. And when we're able to achieve that balance, what I call the flow, the balance, and the power, that is internal leverage. So I'm actually curious, does that make sense? Is that clear? Because I'm always trying to refine how I describe the concept of internal leverage.
Yes, I completely agree with you that everything starts from within and that there are these different factors within us that we need to work on and really allow them to come together so that we can thrive in a kind of external way. And I think that's really important. I mean, it's vital to my work as well, where I help with the internal around the mindset and the external around the strategy. And
Right.
and I love that you do that too, because I think that oftentimes we see those things really separated, but actually when it's the whole human who is responsible for their entrepreneurial journey, we need to treat them as an internal being as well, and to really allow them to shine and thrive internally first so that they can make the impact on the world they're meant to make. So
Right.
I love that you bring those together. And I think it is a bit complex because there are so many different factors that contribute to it, aren't there?
There is. And, to add on to that, I mean, here's what I can say as a coach. My goal obviously is to help you when somebody comes to me and they say, look, I want to grow my business. I want to, increase my income. My goal is to get you that result for yourself, right? But the game we play is that you're focused on that result. And while you're focused on that result, I'm focused on helping you become the version of yourself who can easily create that result. And so this idea of transformation and growth is really essential in the work that I do. And any sort of transformational coach, whether you're working in a business setting, you're working in a relationship setting, or in health, which is kind of like the three main areas of marketing. What's necessary in order to have the best health of your life, and what's necessary to have the best relationship of your life and the best financial situation of your life is change, is transformation, right? Something that comes from within. And so what's really interesting about marketing is that nobody signs up to buy transformation, right? Only mindset junkies and people that are just addicted to self-help seminars like myself, like, will bounce around here and there and pay lots of money for that. But to be honest, what moves the needle is that result, right? People want the abs. People want the perfect relationship, want to be in love. People want the bank account that reeks of success. So it's like this kind of this dynamic of sell them what they want and give them what they need. And it reminds me of a T-shirt that I saw one time at one of my coaching seminars that said, "I asked for strawberries and all I got was enlightenment." So I think that's kind of funny. Just that idea of really at the core of all of this work is this idea of transformation.
Yes, absolutely. I love how you talk about that understanding of how you have the power to help people to transform, but you speak in a language which resonates with the results that they're looking for before they go through that transformation.
Right.
It might be quite different when they look back on that transformation that they've gone through. But
Right.
I agree completely that it's a different language in terms of what people might be setting out to achieve first.
Right.
And then they go on that journey. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how you've told us a bit about your specific area of coaching and helping entrepreneurs with their mindset. So how did you find that this was the area for you, that this was your true purpose?
Yeah. So I've always been fascinated by story. There's a reason why I got into filmmaking. I find that it's, through story, you can really elicit emotion and transformation and transference of ideas. And so for many years, I've worked with actors, and I spent a lot of time analyzing scripts and breaking down text to get to the subtext and the underlying narrative and bringing out authentic performance and just working with this concept of story. And of course, through my studies of Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy and psychology, it just keeps coming back to how, story is for me the essence of life. And so when I got into coaching, I always knew I wanted to facilitate some sort of personal growth work, right? Some sort of transformational work. I just didn't know what it looked like. And when I got into coaching, really what it was all about was two things. Well, one was the sort of, the ability to read between lines and to work with people, right? And there's a certain skill that goes into that. And that's really around focus and attention. And I think, people always say, well, what's your superpower? Mine is two things: listening and asking really powerful questions. And what's interesting is that on the surface, it doesn't seem like I can really, save the planet with that. But I've created an entire business just doing that pretty much. I mean, there's other moving parts to it as well. But really, when I'm in my element is when I'm present with somebody, because all of a sudden, that's where magic happens. But then the other thing that I wanted to address is looking at those stories that are happening at the bottom of the iceberg, right? What are those narratives that went into your psychology between the ages of 0 and 7 when you didn't have a critical filter and you were like a sponge just absorbing from your parents and your environment and from society and TV? You were just absorbing all these ideas, these stories, these beliefs, these narratives around how to be, how to show up in your life. And so, people come to me because they want to make a lot of money, and we talk about strategy. There's definitely strategy needs to be there, but the majority of time we're going deep into what is their story, right? What are the stories that have created the results that exist in their life and in their business? And when we start to make that unconscious conscious, all of a sudden, that's where the transformation happens, right? People get these aha moments, and it's like their brain waves shift. I heard one time that, we're in beta brainwave throughout our waking consciousness, and when we sleep, we're like in theta and delta. But when we have these aha transcendental moments, our brainwave shifts altogether into gamma. And so it's like this process of shifting not only the way people think, but the way their brains operate. And we know a lot about that through neuroplasticity as well. And yeah, I mean, it's just a fascinating experience to me, the sort of marriage of what's happening in the body, but then also what's happening on a psychological level when we're exposing these stories. And then more importantly, developing the agency and the power to be more choiceful about which stories are going to help us moving forward in our life.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how you bring up your skills around listening and asking good questions, because really that is what coaching is all about. And the power that I love about it is how it helps the people who we coach to really find their own answers and their own wisdoms, and we guide them through that process. And it's so beautiful that listening is the most important thing. I think the same of podcasting as well, actually. I think listening is probably the most important thing that a good podcaster needs to have. Maybe that's a style thing, but when I listen to a podcast where I hear interruption and a lack of listening, I can't stomach it. The same goes for on Clubhouse rooms.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a turnoff.
Yeah, listening it's such an underrated skill in our society still, I think.
Yeah.
So powerful.
100%.
If you enjoy Going Conscious, please subscribe for a new episode every Wednesday. If you think your friends and networks would benefit from listening, please share this podcast of fulfillment and freedom with them. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. It's great to read what you think, and your support makes a big difference. Together, let's grow our courage and tools to transform and live the lives we really want to. As well as creating Going Conscious, I work as a transformation coach and conscious brand consultant. I'm on a mission to help holistically maximize conscious entrepreneurs to drive positive changes for themselves, others, and the planet. I can help you to transition and level up personally, and I can help your brand grow and make a bigger impact. To connect with me and find out more about how we can work together, find me on Instagram at Nikki Trott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. Please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and let's talk about your path of growth and development. So, Abraham, can you tell us a bit about the on-off switch in the brain, which you help people to discover? I'm really fascinated to discover more about that concept.
Yeah. Well, I think before we get into this idea of the on-off switch, I want to bring up, a big part of what I help people to do, and this is also this, again, with this idea of internal leverage, is to unlock what's called the flow state. And there's a lot more talk that's that's going around in many circles around this idea of tapping or hacking flow, so that what was really difficult before now becomes easy, because our physiology has changed, our ability to focus has shifted. And there's all sorts of studies that in science that shows that executives who are able to consistently unlock flow states are like 500% more effective in what it is that they're focused on, what it is that they're doing. So what's really interesting in my studies of neuroscience, I actually studied neuroscience for business at MIT. And one of the things that I came across was this idea that, when people report a lot of people say, oh, I'm stuck in my head, I can't make decisions, I'm in analysis paralysis, procrastination, I have this inner self-critic, like all this stuff that comes up. And you hear a lot of mindset coaches talk about, oh, well, you got to journal it, you got to do affirmations, and all that's great. But my experience is that that inner critic still wouldn't shut up, even with all of the coaching and the therapy and all this and that. And I needed something a little bit more hardcore. And so that's where the physiology comes in. And, Tony Robbins talks about this a lot, about, you have to change your posture and change your state. And if you want to, or, you have to create motion to affect your emotion, and you change your state in order to affect your results. And that's absolutely true. And so one of the things that I found in my studies in neuroscience is that our prefrontal cortex, which again is that executive function of the brain, and it's responsible for decision making, for rational analysis, and willpower, when overstimulated, becomes overanalysis. It becomes this putting off of things because we catastrophize about it, right? We mentalize. We get caught up in our head. When people say I'm stuck in my head, it's because their prefrontal cortex is working very hard. And so what's absolutely necessary to get into that flow state is to develop techniques to shut that part of the brain down. Not permanently, not in a way that is damaging, but in a way that enables us to unlock our flow state. And there's actually a professor in, I believe, Beirut, who has this theory that all flow state and mystical experience is a phenomenon called transient hypofrontality, which is a slowing down of the prefrontal cortex. And so what happens when we're able to do that is then all of a sudden we're tapping into more primitive aspects of our brain, our limbic system, our brainstem, where it's all of a sudden that part is coming online. So all of the emotions that we have stuffed down and stored away because there's too much shame or that there's no opportunity for us to express it, all of a sudden that starts to get unleashed and unlocked. And behind all of that is this sense of power and clarity and certainty. And so obviously reading from my website, one of the things that I'm known for in many entrepreneurial communities is using the power of breathwork. Breathwork it's like this hack for flow state, for shutting down the prefrontal cortex and getting us into a place where all of a sudden we have more clarity and it's game time. So it can be used in two ways. It can be used to sort of get us, like, to put us into state where we're all of a sudden more effective, more productive, more influential. So for instance, in the case of doing a sales conversation or a presentation or anything where you're on point, you have to perform. It can help get rid of all the mental chatter and the jitters that prevent you and block you from really performing at your best. And alternatively, it also has the power to relax you and to give you, to put the lever, if you will, the switch in your hands so that you can bring yourself up into a state of high arousal Or when it's time to, like, for instance, after work, bring yourself down. Because the other thing that so many of my clients face is that they're just not able to turn the brain off after work. So 5, 6, 7, whatever PM hits, and they go home, but they're not present with their loved ones. And now their marriage suffers. Now their relationship with their kids suffer. Now they can't get good sleep at night. They're up until 1, 2 in the morning because they're constantly ruminating about, business tasks and open loops and things like that. So what's absolutely necessary that I found with a lot of my high level clients is being able to be in more control of when to turn our brain on and when to turn it off. And there's multiple ways to do it. The number one way I like to do it is through the practice of breath work.
Amazing. I absolutely love breathwork as well. Adore it. And I've used breathwork mostly in quite full-on capacities, I suppose, where I've had, 1 hour or 1.5 hour breathwork sessions and really had some incredibly psychedelic experiences. But how do you integrate breathwork into your working day?
It's a great question. So I like to use, I have like a sequence of protocols, and it really depends on what is the need, right? There's a certain breath work practice that you can do when you're first getting up in order to sort of prime yourself and get yourself ready for the day. There's a way to breathe that, it's like taking a glass of coffee, right? And you're awake. There's a way to breathe that sustains your energy and sustains your level of focus. There's a way to breathe to have those psychedelic experiences, which is not, I wouldn't recommend that, right before a business meeting, but it's good to have every once in a while, just sort of, I call that the mile high view because, we get so lost in the weeds. It's good to have one of those transcendent experiences, I would say even once a week, just to make sure that we're on the right track and that we're not getting off. And then there's another protocol for at the end of the day to kind of shut things down, to wind down, and to, and to be able to sort of close the laptop inside of our head. So really, just to answer your question, yeah, there's various different short breathing techniques that you can do, all between, say, anywhere between 30 seconds to 5 minutes, that enable you to access different states that you want to be in.
Amazing. Such a powerful tool. And Abraham, you're a new father. Congratulations.
I am. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, I don't know how old your baby is, so it'd be great to know that. And then I'm wondering, what is the biggest thing that your baby has taught you?
Wow. Well, my baby is going to turn 15 months in about a week. And I think patience, which I thought I had mastered patience. I mean, everybody, I mean, at least up until a few years ago, everybody would say, oh, Abraham, he's calm, he's relaxed, he's patient because of all the meditation that I've done. But when I'm trying to run a business and I'm, like halfway across the world and I'm trying to make the most of Clubhouse and I'm trying to do this and trying to do that, and at the same time being a father, all of a sudden a whole new level, a whole new experience of patience has entered into my life. And it's like I'm a beginner once again, which is a pretty common experience that from what I hear from other fathers and parents, mothers and fathers.
Yeah, I can imagine. And how do you then help yourself to progress on that journey of patience as a new father?
I think it's important to, to give yourself what you need. I know that I lose my patience when I sacrifice and I just like I put the oxygen mask on my wife or my baby or in my clients before I put it on myself. And part of the reason why I took a couple of days to come revisit my spiritual community is so that I can just, because I knew inside of myself there's this like part of myself that said, hey, I need a minute, I need a break. So I just packed up and I said, hey babe, I just need like a day or two, I'll be back. And she supported. And so I think it's really important to make sure that you have what you need in terms of sleep and food and space and time, in order to really to show up and to be flexible. Because if you continue to sacrifice and give away, the things that you need to sustain yourself, then naturally things are going to go south pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Really making sure that you look after yourself first so that you have everything to share. And I think we all know that advice, but it's so easy not to follow it yourself. It's much easier to give that advice than to take it. Definitely.
Well, we're in the reminder business, as I like to say.
Yes. Yes, that's true. What does personal success look like to you, Abraham? And how has this changed across the course of your life journey so far?
Well, I think there's different levels of saying that. If you ask me that at 2 p.m., it'll be different than if you ask me at 5 in the morning. I mean, deep down, my mission is to inspire and empower a billion people. I feel most alive when I'm in the process of doing that. If it's one person or if it's a room filled with hundreds of people, I love to be able to move the needle forward on people's journeys and help them to make the unconscious conscious. And so success for me is being able to do that on a consistent basis, where I just, every day I'm showing up and I'm just, that's all I have to do. That's my flow state. And there's days like that, and then there's long stretches where it's not like that. And so success for me is being able to maximize my ability to serve. So that's sort of the nice answer. I think the other side of it is creating this financial stability, in that I get to choose when I work, and that I can take long chunks of time off, and that I can invest in various projects. Like, so for instance, I'm here with my community and they have an incredible eco village and they're doing all sorts of sustainability stuff. And it's just like, wow, this is great. I'm not an eco guy. Like, it's just not my thing, but I want to give money to support eco people and save the planet. And so I definitely want to get to a place where I can fund a lot of the projects that I believe in. So for me, that in a professional zone, that's what success would look like. And of course, obviously, a happy and healthy family as well is big and important to me as well.
Yeah. And I love how you describe how, the more financial success you have, the more you can support the companies, projects, people who you really believe in and who align with your values. And so I'm wondering, with the clients who you work with, from corporate clients through to individual entrepreneurs, how important is it for you that what they do aligns with your values? Is that something that you need, or is that something that is not a filter for you? How does that fit together?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to work with people that are building bombs to drop on kids, or, I mean, that's, I guess, a very extreme example, but I have had the good fortune to work with transformational leaders, inspiring people. Even if they're just CEOs of a small business that manufactures tools and things like that. At least that there's the culture of where they work is one that is life producing, not life sucking or life draining. I mean, that's not something that I want to get involved with. So yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I've had the good fortune to basically everybody that I've worked with more or less has been somebody of integrity and trying to do something of benefit to this world, to this planet. And I guess I've just unconsciously been able to repel anybody who is not in alignment with that. So I haven't had the opportunity to walk out of a meeting or hang up on somebody because they're they're out of alignment. I'm just laughing because just an hour ago, a friend of mine was telling me a story about this guy, Vishen Lakhiani, who founded Mind Valley, who walked out of a meeting with somebody, and there was like a $50,000 contract because the person, yelled at somebody else and called them a racial slur. And he just got up out of his seat and walked out. And I haven't had the opportunity to experience something like that yet, but I'm looking forward to walking out of meetings.
Well, it's good to know where your boundaries lie, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's interesting you say that. I also have, I mean, when I made my first transition from fashion, then I turned down a bunch of things, but otherwise I've never turned down somebody who has come to work, wanting to work for me, with me. I've never turned anyone down specifically because of this. There have been people who have been a little bit out of alignment, and I've made that clear and been honest to
Mm.
them. and told them that I don't think that it's the right partnership,
Right.
which happens to everybody. But I think that the more authentic and open we are in what we put out in the world, the more we automatically repel the people who don't resonate with that. And that's
Right.
perfect.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting to hear you have the same experience.
I will say this. I am definitely at a point in my career, I guess, in my business, where if it's a client who is going to be a lot of work and very demanding, or basically wants me to do the work for the client, then I have no problem turning that person down.
Yeah, perhaps that's a sign that they're not ready.
Right.
Yeah. So, Abraham, as we come towards the end of our conversation today, is there a key takeaway or message that you'd like to share?
Just that, if we bring it back to the, what we were talking about at the beginning about developing more awareness, what happens when we do that is that we create more agency for ourselves. And I work with a lot of agency owners, and they don't really understand or know the original meaning of the word agency, which means the ability to choose. And that's important, because if we come back to that unconscious conscious mind divide, it's 12% of our mind is conscious and 88% unconscious, more or less, give or take. And it's almost like we have information coming, from our trusted advisors, but 9 out of the 10 trusted advisors are wearing masks and hoods, and we don't really know who they are. So it's really important to pull back the layers on where that advice is coming from. And this is all internal, right? Any decision that we make, business decision, life decision, it's coming mostly from an unconscious place. And so the more we're able to develop that ability to be aware, the more we have agency and choicefulness, which is our greatest power. So that's the true meaning of internal leverage. And if anybody takes anything from this call, I think that's what it's all about.
I love that. Choicefulness is our greatest power. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And is there a book that you read recently, or just one of your favorites that you'd like to share and recommend with us?
The last one that I read is called The Kabbalion, which was written over 100 years ago, and it's based on these hermetic principles or universal laws. And I love it because, well, two things. One, a lot of people talk about law of attraction and, manifestation and all this. And that languaging evolves out of the New Thought movement, which was a movement, about over 100 years ago, that really looked at some of the mystical traditions, the Eastern traditions. We had Vivekananda coming over to the States from India, looking at the Hermetic traditions of the West, which is really pretty much saying the same thing. All mystical traditions, all mysticism is pretty essentially the same. And what's great about this book, The Kabbalion, is that it really outlines these 7 universal laws or universal principles, which are, you find throughout a lot of other books. For instance, Think and Grow Rich, The Science of Getting Rich, all these sort of classical texts. And it's great. I mean, the reason why I love it is because it mirrors exactly all the same philosophy that I spent 20 years of my life studying with monks, traveling to India, sleeping on the floor. Like, all the same stuff applies, and it can be applied and to help us, to empower us to go deep in meditation and service, but it can also empower us in developing more agency in our lives and in our businesses. So
amazing.
Yeah.
And can you just tell us a bit about what does creating more agency or choicefulness in our lives and businesses, what does that do for us?
It changes our results. It enables us to accomplish incredible things. For instance, one of my mentors, his thing is helping people to turn their yearly income into a monthly income, which for most people is like mind-boggling, but is a very common occurrence when you start to go through this work, when you develop your ability to be more aware. And I think the other piece to this is to show up and confront your stuff. There's another S word I usually use there, but to confront your truth, really. And a great quote that I'll just say is, the degree to which a person can grow, or their business can grow for that matter, is directly proportional to the amount of truth you can take about yourself without running away. And I think the problem that we find in a lot of entrepreneurial and certainly in the conscious communities is that it's all like, yes, abundance and law of attraction and think positive thoughts, but it's not actually facing the real truth of what's going on internally, the feelings of shame, the feeling of guilt or of being exposed, the feeling of I'm not good enough, like really taking a look at what's going on beneath the surface and showing up and confronting that, because it's painful to do, but the more that we avoid it, the more suffering we cause for ourselves. And so really the path is not about avoidance, but confrontation. So I know that was a little bit of a loop around, but that for me is what is the process of developing more agency, and really ties together everything that we've been talking about here today.
Yes, I love that. The importance of really confronting ourselves and our truths, and how it's so much easier often to just hide from them. And we're really hiding from ourselves more than anything else
Right.
that holds us back. Yes, absolutely. So lastly, where's the best place for listeners to find you and your work online?
I would say go to my website, heislercoaching.com, HEISLER coaching.com. I have a free training there to help you to access that on-off switch in your brain using the power of breath. And then you can read all about all the other stuff that I do on my website.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Abraham. I've loved speaking with you today.
Thanks, Nikki. Great to be here.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with the lovely Abraham. He talks about money mindset and the importance of us changing our stories with money in order to create abundance. For most of us, money has been loaded with assumptions and judgments throughout our lives, as though money were a person we have a complex relationship with, instead of a simple energy. Money is a tool which can enhance our lives and increase our impact on the lives of others and our world. I love how Abraham also describes how growth is proportional to the truth you can take about yourself. I haven't heard this put quite like that before and find it very powerful. We seem to think it's easier to turn away from the sometimes hard truth, but that means letting it simmer and not addressing what we need to deal with, which holds us back so we can't grow and progress. I really enjoyed speaking with another person on a similar mission to me. We're both working to help entrepreneurs who want to make a positive impact, and we work to help them succeed. The more conscious leaders we have changing the world with business, the more we will see consciousness rise and the world shift. Each of us helping them comes from a different place with a different approach, and we each attract the right people to work with us at any time. It's important that we work together, that we support each other with abundance and rise up together to help as many people as we can. There are certainly many more people in the world who want to be conscious leaders than there are people who are ready to support them. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and short review. If you think people you know might benefit from listening to Going Conscious, please share it with them. I know I get much of my inspiration from podcasts which are shared with me. For all episodes, our library and more, visit goingconscious.com. Your support to spread this positive message of fulfillment and freedom means so much. As well as hosting Going Conscious, I help conscious entrepreneurs to transition and unleash their power and purpose with my transformation coaching and conscious brand consulting work. Discover more on Instagram @NikkiTrott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you and to talk about your goals, questions, or how we can work together. And if I don't hear from you before then, see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going Conscious. As always, live your freedom.